Wednesday, October 18. The Early Church and Comfort Zones. Read Acts chapter 8, verses 1 to 4. In the early church, what brought about the scattering of believers beyond their comfort zone? Acts 8, beginning at verse 1. Now Saul was consenting to his death. At that time, a great persecution arose against the church which was at Jerusalem, and they were all scattered throughout the regions of Judea and Samaria, except the apostles. And devout men carried Stephen to his burial and made great lamentation over him. As for Saul, he made havoc of the church, entering every house and dragging off men and women, committing them to prison. Therefore, those who were scattered went everywhere, preaching the word. Until this time, the early church was mainly in Jerusalem, or within the Jewish territory and among the Jewish people. When persecution began, in which Saul, a devout Jew and a Pharisee, was actively involved, the church in Jerusalem was then dispersed all over Judea and Samaria. Jesus had predicted in Acts chapter 1, verse 8, that "You will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria." This statement was fulfilled as noted in Acts chapter 8, verse 4, that those who had been scattered preached the word wherever they went. Even after the church began to move out beyond Jerusalem, the believers were still preaching in the regions of the Jews or in the neighborhoods of the Jewish people in other cities. Acts chapter 11 verse 19 indicates that the believers were dispersed all the way to Phoenicia or Lebanon and Cyprus, but they did not at this stage preach the message to anyone other than the Jews alone. Let's look at that text in Acts 11:19. Now those who were scattered after the persecution that arose over Stephen travelled as far as Phoenicia, Cyprus, and Antioch, preaching the word to no one but the Jews only. The disciples of Jesus and the early church did not intend to see the Gentiles, but only Jews come to the Lord. They still had very narrow views on what the mission of the church was to be. Peter, a disciple of Jesus and one of the leading figures of the early church, was averse to taking the gospel message to the Gentiles, even after Paul had begun to do so. Peter was known as an apostle to the circumcised, meaning the Jews, and Paul an apostle to the Gentiles. Let's read Acts chapter 2, verse 8. For he who worked effectively in Peter for the apostleship to the circumcised also worked effectively in me toward the Gentiles. Early on, Peter did not even want to be seen with the Gentiles, as we read in Galatians 2, verses 11 and 12. Now when Peter had come to Antioch, I withstood him to his face, because he was to be blamed. For before certain men came from James, he would eat with the Gentiles. But when they came, he withdrew and separated himself, fearing those who were of the circumcision. However, God moved Peter out of his comfort zone and changed his heart. He was starting to learn about what the gospel commission really entailed and what Jesus' death was meant to accomplish for the whole world. And then let's read Acts chapter 10, verses 9 to 15 and 28 to 29, and answer this question. What was the message that the Lord was giving to Peter? And how must we in our day and age apply this principle to the work of mission? Let's read those texts. Acts 10, verses 9 to 15. The next day, as they went on their journey and drew near the city, Peter went up on the housetop to pray about the 6th hour. Then he became very hungry and wanted to eat. But while they made ready, he fell into a trance and saw heaven opened and an object like a great sheet bound at the four corners descending to him and let down to the earth. In it were all kinds of four-footed animals of the earth, wild beasts, creeping things, and birds of the air. And a voice came to him, Rise, Peter, kill and eat. But Peter said, Not so, Lord, for I have never eaten anything common or unclean. And a voice spoke to him again the second time, "What God has cleansed, you must not call common." You have been listening to a reading of the Adult Sabbath School lessons by Dr. Percy Harrold and the inside story by his niece Sibylla. Apart from being provided free to those who are visually impaired, these audio lessons are available on the official General Conference Sabbath School and Personal Ministry app, on SoundCloud, Apple iTunes, and also on YouTube. Search for Percy Harrold Sabbath to find all of these. And remembering all the time that God is always faithful.